Welcome to Subject to Power. I'm El Kamihira. In the last episode, we went to Hungary and heard about what Hungarian women struggle with under their particular flavor of patriarchal rule. In this episode, we're going across the globe to China. And it is truly amazing to me how one country's oppressive tactics map so perfectly across the next country's oppressive tactics. There are, of course, different historical details, cultural differences, different approaches, but these male-run totalitarian governments really do just copy-paste each other, be it the US, Hungary, China, and of course, many more, fill in the blanks. All seem to be different variations on the same theme, mainly to keep women vulnerable and under their control and away from self-determination and any political power. My guest today, Li Wen, started out as a journalist and government policy analyst in China and now lives in Germany, where she produces a wildly popular Chinese podcast called Seahorse Planet. In this episode, we talk about China's U-turn on gender equality, the many, many social pressures women are subjected to now, including beauty duty, the marriage trap, discrimination in education and jobs market, and what its latest MeToo movement is accomplishing. We also talk about the huge ripple effects of China's 35-year-long one-child policy and compare notes between the US and China on the birth rate panic and each of our government's desperate attempts to promote marriage and so-called family values. We also talk about what is considered a good and acceptable kind of feminism in China and the kind of feminism that can ruin your life, and how we now, in this ultra-patriarchal world, build a more just social order for women and everybody, and what that looks like. I've heard your name pronounced and said different ways. What is the correct way of saying your name?
If you do it in Chinese, it's Li Wen.
Li Wen.
Yeah. Li is my mother's surname. And in Chinese, the surname is before the first name.
Got you. But you have another name, Quinn or Chin.
The last name. Qing is my father's surname, which I abandoned now.
Oh, okay. Good to know. So just Li Wen. Yep. Okay.
I'm Li Wen now. I used to be Qing Li Wen, but I abandoned his surname some years ago.
Okay. Well, good to know. I abandoned
Matriarchy.
Yeah, exactly. I abandoned my father's name when I got married to a man, which is not the same.
Well, I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to let my husband to follow my surname, but I was unhappy about him because at that time, I still use my father's surname. I'm unhappy that he followed my father's surname, so I did not let him do that.
So have you lived in Germany for a long time? Are you comfortable with me asking some personal questions about your story?
I'm completely comfortable with anything, yeah.
Okay, that's good. So how long have you lived in Germany?
I moved here at the end of 2012, so it's already, 13 years.
Wow. And what brought you to Germany?
This is complicated question. The simple question would sound like I come here for a man, but it's actually not. I chose this man to help me coming to Germany because I was very much in a political depression in China, and I was not able to face a future with my daughter that is so patriarchal and heading towards totalitarianism.
Yeah.
And so I was afraid that my daughter would grow up in a country that doesn't protect women's safety, also publicly discriminate against them in all sorts of job opportunities. And it's hard for them to get the equal opportunity. And also at that time, the current president was about to get power. I mean, when I decided to move away from China, I did not know that. But then when I moved away from China in 2012, it was the time when he got into power. And then later he amended the constitution and decided that he would be a president for the rest of his life. And it was at that time I realized that, okay, there's no way I would go back. And so I stayed. Yeah.
And were you a feminist before you left China? Were you a feminist in China?
I have been a feminist, although not openly so. I have been a feminist since I was a child.
Okay.
My mother was a half feminist, I would say, because in the communist time, there was some good legacy, which is treating women equally, at least ideologically. There was a socialist slogan, women can uphold half of the sky. And that was during the founding of the People's Republic of China. I mean, even before that, during the revolution, the women have actively participated in shaping the new China, we would say. And so they were able to gain some power. And particularly in this sort of equal rights movement, in the communist movement. That's how my mother was educated. And she passed this down to me. However, feminism has always been treated with suspicion in a way that is not spoken. And so I also did not dare to claim that I was a feminist. I could only say I believe in the equality between men and women, but I could not say I was a feminist until very late, until actually after I left China.
You couldn't say it openly until you left China. Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, not because it was illegal, but because if I said that at that time, even today, if you openly said you are a feminist, there would be backlash in your job, in your daily life.
And what's the situation now compared to when you left? What is it like to be a feminist in China today?
If you only talk about the term feminists, there are two ways to translate it. One is 女性主义, one is 女权主义. So the difference exists in one character, 性 or 权. If you translate it as 女权主义, which literal translation of that means the activists for women's rights and power, that is 女权. And if you say 女性, it is women, it's just women. So basically, if you've translated as 女性主义, it means womenism, which makes no sense. But most of the women nowadays in China don't dare to claim that they are for women's power. They would say they are for women.
Yeah.
And that would be safer. But then the term was translated as 女权主义, which means for women's power, starting from the very beginning, even before the 20th century. Anyways, the Communist Party saw that for women's power, the word power somehow threatens them. You know, it's a very patriarchal party. So this term was associated with bad Western influence to subvert the communist system. And so after that, in the 1980s and 90s, a different term was invented, which is 女性主义. So it turns into womenism instead. So nowadays, it depends on which one you claim. If you say you are for women's power, then you are actually the troublemaker. You are seen as the troublemaker.
Gotcha.
But if you call, 女性主义, then it's okay. Like they sort of accept.
You're a friendly sort of feminist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if you compare, but if you're not talking about the term, but about women's situation in China, the overall gender equality in China has declined ever since 2008 steadily. And only in the past 2 or 3 years, it's sort of like stopped declining because other countries drop faster.
That's funny. So by comparison.
Yeah. That's because if you look at the IMF's gender equality list, you can see the stable decline of women's participation in political power as well as job and etc. So on this side, it's somehow steadily declining. And also, women's rights to be born in China has been always at the bottom of the list in the world.
Yeah.
Until India surpassed us in the past 2 years. So we are the second last. Yeah.
You're talking about like the sex-selective abortion and female infanticide.
Yeah, the right to health and birth, which means that baby girls are aborted before they are born.
Yeah. And I want to dig into that much more, but I wanted to just go back a little bit to what you said, that the gender equality started a resurgence in about 2008. So I want to kind of like get into what happened and also get a sense of like, what are the feminist issues in China? What are feminists fighting for?
It's a lot because women's rights are basically behind men's rights everywhere in every aspect of our lives and work. But I think like all women in the world, the first thing that the feminists are fighting for is women's right to be safe. So male violence is a very, very big issue, like everywhere else. The official statistics is that 1/3 of Chinese women have suffered from domestic violence. But I believe the number is much worse than that. Because domestic violence is almost everywhere, omnipresent in China. And people somehow see that as normal still. China is relatively good pretty good with the education right, equal right. So that is okay, relatively good. But then not completely good because the universities, higher education, and also including professional education, still has very open sexual discrimination problem. Chinese universities and some of these professional schools still openly reject girls in some of the majors, claiming that women are not strong enough or they are not suitable for this work, for this profession, so they don't. And what is even worse is that because girls are performing, whenever they get equal education, they perform much better than boys. More girls passing the entrance examination of the university than boys. Like now in China, 70% of the bachelor studies are occupied by girls. So you can imagine how big a difference it is. So some university would really lower the score, lower the requirements for boys, lower it so much that it become completely like discrimination against girls. Just because, when women were excluded from universities for all these centuries, and finally when they got into and they performed better than men, suddenly they care about gender equality. Suddenly they want more men in. That is, of course, something the feminists in China also fights for. And then, of course, it is about employment opportunities. So many jobs are kicking women out using all sorts of excuses, and openly so. So it's still a daily fight. And then in cultural and social aspects, there are a lot of misogynist phenomenon, sexual harassment in the workplace, and Also, the social pressure on women, which is very, very East Asian, but also in the West as well. Beauty duty.
I love that term,
duty.
beauty duty.
Yeah. And you know this term actually derived from the U.S. during the Second World War.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. There were posters even of the American government calling for the women to serve the beauty duty, where men were serving in the military.
Yeah.
Women should serve the beauty duty. So it's a sort of common patriarchal society's requirements on women. And in China, in East Asia, including Japan, Korea, Taiwan, mainland China, etc., it's all very heavy beauty duty imposed upon women. And especially the young women, if they don't put on makeup, if they dare to cut their hair short, if they are slightly not even strong. If they are just their normal body shape, they would be called ugly. And being ugly is not just like I don't get appreciation, I don't get attention, but also I don't get jobs. And my boss might discriminate against me. He might not give me, or she, even female bosses, would also discriminate against women who don't serve the beauty duty. And so that cost the young women not only a lot of money and time on putting on makeup and buying clothes, wearing unhealthy shoes, but also cost their health, because having a healthy body is not a commonly accepted thing anymore. They appreciate women who are so skinny that there is a term, they say, good women's weight would not exceed 50 kilos.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tiny. I think I was 50 kilos when I was 13 years old.
Yeah. And you can imagine how unhealthy such a criteria is when you impose it on a girl who's growing in every aspect. She's worried about her weight, so she eats less. And she doesn't eat enough protein and grains. So many women actually get depressed because of their weight, which is completely normal weight.
Right, starving their brains and starving their...
brain as well.
Yeah.
And then the last two things. One is fighting against we call it filial piety. This word is a bit difficult for people to understand, which is the total obedience to the parents and to sacrifice everything you have, your income, your time, your energy, your emotional service to your parents. And normally the parents want you to become a good girl, to marry a guy and have children, which is imposing all these free labor duty on women, because Chinese women shoulder most of the housework nowadays in most of the households.
Right, and not just responsibility to their own families, but also responsibility to their in-laws and their own parents, right? So their responsibility to the entire family tree, essentially.
Exactly. So that is about the same probably in every developing countries, like less developed economies, then it is the woman's job.
So you mentioned before that gender inequality kind of resurged starting in the early aughts or 2008-ish. What happened and what is happening?
2008 has witnessed a major geopolitical shift of power of our time, which is the decline of the West because of the financial crisis of the West, and the rise of China as the second biggest economy in the world, and the Beijing Olympic, which is debut of China as one of the dominant power in the world. And Chinese government aspired then to dominate the world, to surpass the US. And that is the bigger background. And then together also there is later the Jasmine Revolution in North Africa and Middle East that has brought great alarm to the Chinese government, because to witness the downfall of authoritarian governments somehow send strong warning signals to the communist government. And also combined with in 2008, when Xinjiang and Tibet in China witnessed a lot of riots, uprisings. And so after that, the Chinese government started to crack down on human rights lawyers, NGOs, cutting off Western funding of Chinese organizations, and has become much more focused on cultivating nationalist sentiments domestically. And it was a right time to do that, because Chinese were very proud of the rise of China economically. And so nationalist sentiments is always associated with patriarchal thinking, then upholding the Confucius family values and etc. And I think, generally speaking, that's when it went down, women's rights. Because on one hand, it's this crisis mode, like we are surrounded by enemies who don't want us to be strong. That's how the Chinese government thinks.
National unity.
Yeah. And then on the other hand is the so-called traditional values coming back, riding on the sentiments of these men who have been quite resentful of women's power rising.
Right. So there's this like fantasy of a glorious patriarchal past that we now want to return to. And with that, women need to go back home.
Put them to their own place.
Yeah. Put
them to the place where they belong.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think there is another economic phenomenon that I should not omit, which is not by the government or by specific individuals, but as a result of the economic growth, and there are more and more families that become single income family, which means the men earn the money and women become, the housewives. Housewife was not a phenomenon in the communist China. Everybody worked. Like housewife was seen as the Western decadent lifestyle. But after 1990s, this sort of housewife lifestyle was promoted gradually by the Hong Kong, Taiwan TV series, American TV series, whatever, as a lifestyle. And then the middle class start to imitate. And not to say the wealthy people, of course. Women start to quit jobs and stay at home simply because they think their husband can keep them in good financial status.
As a status thing.
As a status thing, or as an escape of the suffocating capitalism, I think. That's part of the psychological, trap.
So women returned home is essentially what happened. Is a combination of discrimination and a kind of like a status move. They became stay-at-home moms.
Yeah, more and more. Yeah, but I mean, still, it's not comparable to Japan or to the US. I think we still have more women working because Chinese women's job participation is among the highest rank in the world.
They have a big part in work participation.
Job participation. Because they work all the time.
Yeah.
They just don't get paid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for some of the work.
You mentioned that China's ranking in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index had declined significantly. You said from 57th out of 139 countries in 2008 to 103rd in 2018. What has happened?
I think political participation of women has declined. Mostly, in the decision-making positions. China is now ruled by all men, generally speaking. President Xi Jinping, who is a man, of course, but then there is the Communist Party's power center is called the Standing Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, which is like 7 men now. It used to be 9. And it is now, it is all men.
It's all men.
Has been all men. And also we have this legislative body. Women's participation there has also declined. I don't have the specific statistics, but decision makers in different provinces and on a local level is also, women are sort of excluded. This is one thing. The other thing is that because in the past we had, for example, some NGOs who are working for women's interests, like the China's anti-domestic violence network, that has been basically killed by the government after the Jasmine Revolution. And then within the government, of course, when you want to protect women's interests, you need the government, different government organs to work with you. And there are less and less cooperation on that front. And so women's power within the government has sort of retreated a bit. And in private lives, then because of this, as I said, the social cultural conservatism putting such a heavy burden on women's shoulder, that also somehow handicapped quite some women and somehow ended up them being pushed into marriage and having children and losing their power in their career, in their professional life. This only started to change since this round of feminist movement starting in 2018. And then after that is this pandemic. The pandemic has played an unexpected role in liberating the women because it greatly reduced Chinese families' wish to have children. 4 years of lockdown in China has costed the psyche of the nation, so people stop having children.
That's funny.
So, yeah. I mean, not only women, but also men. So many of them don't want children, young men. And that is probably why, part of the reason for the sharp decline, sharp drop of the birth rate in China. And this year, according to some of the experts, China will have less than 3 million babies born, which is a sharp contrast to year 2001, when 17 million babies were born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the population is and will be shrinking. Like, that's
it's
given.
already.
It's already.
It already stopped growing. Yeah, it's shrinking. Yeah. And it will shrink really fast. And that is why the government now, we are actually facing a new danger. As feminists, we see the new danger, which is China turning into a handmaid's country.
Yeah, handmaid's tale country, yeah. Well, how so? Can you explain?
Because the government now is trying its best to convince young people to get more children. That might result in more discrimination against women in education as well as job opportunities, employment.
Sure, because the most important thing will be becoming a mother. Yeah.
Exactly. You have seen male so-called experts who have repeatedly mentioned the statistics that shows the more education women get, the less children they have.
Yeah.
And that is a dangerous sign. If the government really take this into the policy making thinking, then they would try to reduce women's education. And the other thing is that the government realizes that it cannot control women yet who have got good education. So local government were burdened with this assignment to increase their birth rate in their districts. And so the local governments, especially in the countryside or in a small towns, we have heard a case, local government are controlling women's menstruation, how do you call it, schedule or calendar.
Oh, this sounds so frightening.
It is. It's really frightening. And they are now restricting women's abortion rights, which was not the case.
That's new in China.
That's relatively new because in my generation and my mother's generation, abortion was easy to have access to. You are a woman, you go to a hospital, you say, I want to abort my child. You don't need the husband's consent. You didn't need that. But now you do.
Wow.
You need family members' approval. And had it not been the case, my mother would have given birth to a younger brother of mine.
I see.
My mother decided not to have the third child, so she aborted the third child secretly by herself without my father knowing. My father was furious about it. But then at that time, if she had given birth to a third child, she would lose her job. She was a teacher.
I see.
And so that basically is what we are trying to prevent.
Yeah. I can't help but looking at my own country. I live in the US and see, incredible parallels. It's not done exactly the same way, but very, very similar aims, very similar motivations, very similar psychology, very similar governments, governments of men who essentially want to turn women into breeders for the nation.
It hasn't happened yet in China to such a scale, but I've seen the horror stories from the US and how many women died from unwanted pregnancy and also from, their life could have been saved.
Absolutely. We're having young women bleed out and die of sepsis and or being forced to carry unviable pregnancies, and we have women dying currently routinely of this.
It's really a horror story every day. I see that. How do you? I'm the interviewee, but I really want to know, what are the American women doing right now to change that? It's so frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating. So with the Trump administration in place, they are not just cracking down on abortion law, but they're also defunding organizations that provide abortion. And this has been going on for a long time, where it's become scary to be a gynecologist. So there are fewer and fewer and fewer gynecologists and fewer abortion providers. And so they're kind of like financially starving them out of the various states where they exist and making it so scary and threatening to become an abortion provider that very few go into the profession to begin with. So this has kind of been going on. This is a war on abortion care that's been going on for decades.
Yeah, it is. I'm just wondering I've been on social media also observing the American feminist activities. And one of the things that really encouraged me is that some of the experience and the ideas raised by East Asian sisters have reached the US, which is the 4B movement, to simply not to date men. If you don't date men, you will not get pregnant. And men should be responsible for this whole shit.
100%. And it has spread here. And it's such an interesting thing because I think the way 4B is manifested in Korea and China and elsewhere is a little bit different than how it's manifesting here, but it's absolutely taking root because of this desperate fight for our rights, our autonomy over our bodies. And so inevitably you come to the only conclusion you really can come to, which is close your legs.
Yeah.
And just develop an unwillingness to be caught up in this war on women, really.
It is a war. It's such a massacre. If you think about the male violence that included, it's just constant massacre.
Yeah. So you mentioned before, and I find this so interesting, which is a very Chinese phenomena, I suppose, is the one-child policy and all of the sort of ripple effects, intended consequences, but also unintended consequences. And so I wanted to know if you can take us back. A lot of people aren't super well-versed in the history and what happened. Can you take us through kind of a part of the history of the one-child policy and what has happened from it?
Yeah, so Chinese government started this one-child policy in 1976, 1 year after I was born, because at that time China's ability to feed its population is lagging behind its population growth.
Yeah.
So the country is struggling, the government is struggling, and realized that, okay, the previous measures to encourage or even force the population growth by Mao Zedong was wrong. So it went to the other extreme. So people might not know. I mean, that part of the history before the one-child policy might not be known, that actually Mao Zedong wanted the population to grow as much as it could. So he actually enforced a lot of measures that resulted in women having to give birth incessantly. Many women actually suffered immensely from that. And then in 1976, the Chinese government decided, after Mao died, the Chinese government decided, okay, we have to restrict the population growth. Otherwise, we will have a poverty issue that is so big that we cannot handle it. And the government forced every household only to have one child or have 2 children maximum in the countryside if your first child is girl. Meaning in the countryside, they are more lenient, they are more understanding of the peasants' wish to have a son. So if your first child is a girl, then you are allowed to have the second child. But if the second child is still a girl, you're not allowed to have more. So there were lots of brutal measures implemented in those years to punish the family that have more children than they should. And most of these people who suffered were women, because they were forced to have abortion at late stage, or their houses were destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really brutal. But that effectively resulted in a majority of the country having only one child, and by accident created the first and the last generation of single daughters who have gained unprecedented resources being raised or getting education. So this whole thing coincided with China's miraculous growth economically. So these girls, they could get not only the best education, and they could also go abroad to study, and they could also start their business because the market was so good, and it was all liberal capitalist time in certain part of the country. So they benefited a lot from that. And this generation of single daughters was the one that has started the 2018 MeToo movement in China. They got so fed up. They got so fed up with a dangerous working environment and suffocating working environment due to men's sexual harassment, and also using sexual harassment as a way to keep them away from power, like kick them out, basically, of the things that they are doing. So MeToo movement started, and then gradually it expanded into a feminist movement that is still going on right now.
So a new generation of women in charge, and basically powered by the internet, it sounds like.
The social media definitely provided the unimaginable opportunity for women, for every woman, as long as they can read and write, to voice their dissent, to express themselves and tell their stories and unite on social media, to push for social changes and to educate each other on feminism. Also, thanks to the relatively good education system in China. So there are many factors combined, of course, that contributed to this.
Yeah. But I'm just thinking about such a big generation of only girls who then got all the resources
Not all,
instead
but more resources than their predecessors. Yeah.
more resources than their predecessors.
Yeah.
And then also probably inherited, right? If there were no sons, they inherited the family's economy. Yeah.
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 So you also have female entrepreneurs more than before. Yeah.
But then the other thing that happened, which I would love your read on, is also because of the one-child policy, the rise of sex-selective abortion and female infanticide, what that caused. And
yeah, the sex selection is banned in China, of course, by the government. It has been banned always. But the problem is that technology keep on evolving. So in the past, it was very difficult to get the ultrasound scan to determine what is the sex of the baby. But nowadays, you can just send your blood sample to Hong Kong. The pregnant women simply have to send the blood sample to Hong Kong, and then they would tell, boy or a girl. So lots of people do that. And now in China, the sex ratio is still tilted towards boys, particularly in the second and the third child. So you see that in the firstborn, the sex ratio is probably like 114 to 100 or 107 to 100, something like that, depending on the province, right? But on the third child, for example, in Beijing, 3 years ago, the sex ratio was 300 to 100. So you can
wait,
imagine.
I'm sorry, my jaw hit the floor. That's 3 times the amount, 3 to 1.
Because you can imagine that mostly people who have 3 children in Beijing are rich people who really want the son. And they have all the means to do that.
So son preference is still very strong, I'm hearing. Yeah.
Still very strong. Because men have power, men have money, men have power. So you want sons to, get you more resources from the society.
Yeah. So now you have a gigantic surplus of unattached males. Yeah?
Yes, incels.
Incels.
Involuntary celibate men.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, they are involuntary celibate because there are not enough women.
Literally, there are not enough women for all of the men.
Yeah, and so of course, they would try, if they are really craving for women and they have the money, they would try to buy brides from Cambodia, Vietnam, neighboring countries, from Ukraine, from Russia, go to these poorer countries to just buy women.
Human trafficking.
But they also know how to do it legally now. So it's an industry.
I see.
I mean, there are human trafficking going on between China and Myanmar, for example. They do that as well. But then very often they just legally marry. They go to this country like Pakistan, they marry there and then they bring the wife home, basically.
So women are turned into commodities because of this gigantic surplus.
Yeah.
Inside and outside China.
Yeah, inside and outside China. Inside China, there is a big topic nowadays. It's called caili, which is the dowry money. I mean, dowry normally is the money that you get from, like women get from the mother when she goes to marry a man, right? But then here it is, caili is the money that the husband's family give to the wife's family before or when they marry as a sort of purchase.
Bride price.
Bride price, yeah, bride price. That's the word, yeah. And that is a major issue because men are very much afraid that women cheat money from them and then divorce them. So the government, as a response to men's outcry, have tightening the control on bride price. The government has ruled that bride price should not exceed certain amount. And if a woman divorced the husband within such a time, the woman's family will have to return this bride price to the man. So it's like basically regulating the woman purchasing industry. I don't know, market.
Yeah, wife market.
Yeah, wife market. It's really very obvious and also shamelessly tilting towards men.
So what are some of the other kind of fallout of having such a huge incel population? I know the government is concerned about it, obviously. What do you think? Why is it a concern?
As we all know, when the male population is not getting wives, like when the male population exceeds the female population too much, then the crime rate would rise. I don't know why the reason for that, but I would argue it's because of male hormone and the male culture. And so the government, of course, is concerned that if you have all these incels, then the social stability would be affected. So the government would try the best to convince young people to get married. But because in the past decade, young people's wish to get married reduced greatly. And also the birth rate reduced greatly as a result. And so the government now is desperately trying to encourage young people to get married. And there are several measures. First is to make it easier to get married. For example, the local government would set up a marriage registration service in music festivals or nightclubs.
Wow, that's desperate.
Yeah, that's funny, right? It's really funny. But then on the other hand, it's like quite vicious. Like they sort of expect you to get drunk and don't know what you are doing and get married by accident.
Wow.
And on the other hand, they make it difficult to divorce. Very difficult. Lots of obstacles. Yeah. And other measures include, like in the past, you go to register your marriage, you have to bring not only your IDs, but also a hukou, which is a formal registration book that you get. It's a very Chinese thing. But now you only need your ID. That is making the life of many young women very dangerous because in the past, normally the hukou is held by the young girl's parents. That basically means if you want to marry a guy, you have to get your parents' approval because the hukou is with them.
It's held by them.
Held by them, yeah. But nowadays, you only need your ID. And many of the young girls, they have their ID with them. So if they are like 18, then you are legally able to make decision to marry a guy. But then some 30 years old guy comes and say, oh, let's get married, it's all romantic. And then you go to a music festival and register there. And then what can the parents do?
You're caught up in it.
That is quite desperate move from the government to lure the young women to get married.
But I'm also thinking about like you have a massive more amount of men than women. And I'm thinking about the psychology. You have this population of women who's thriving and doing very well professionally, educationally, and maybe surpassing them. And yet you have this like massive male population that's underperforming. But at the same time, they're taught at home.
Yeah.
And we have a similar psychology here. They're taught at home that they are entitled to ABC, they're entitled to have women, they're entitled to sex, they're entitled to get whatever they want. So there's like this entitlement on the one hand, and women kind of outperforming and not needing them and not wanting them. What does that do?
It's the same like everywhere. I remember Financial Times has done this report. They done this survey among the younger generation and see how women are actually getting more and more progressive about their rights, women's rights. And the younger generation of men actually goes backwards. So they become more conservative. They are more inclined to believe that women should listen to men, women should stay at home.
You're the head of household as a man. And
yeah, they become more conservative than their fathers. And so this contrast between the young women and young men have become stronger, and the gap between them has become bigger. It's the same thing in China, although we don't have the statistics. But what we can see is that in China nowadays, the young women have more awareness about their own rights, but then the young men are really, really getting more and more misogynist. Unfortunately, the Chinese government censorship departments are working harder on cracking down feminist content, and they basically let loose the incels' voices.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. It's a hard fight nowadays. And the result of that in the physical world, in the real world, is male violence, of course. The young men, they really are violent. They also, how do you call the kind of violence committed by men when women decide to break up with them?
Yeah, I get what you mean. We have the same problem here. Like the most dangerous time for a woman is when she's breaking off a relationship with a man or rejecting a man in any way.
Rejecting. Yeah. So this kind of violent cases, we really see a lot everywhere. And I don't have the statistics. It's not my fault because Chinese government doesn't give it.
Sure.
There's no statistics, but we see cases every day. So
same in the US. There are no statistics on femicide here either, or even the different type of violence, the cause of violence, and that kind of stuff.
You would also have really light sentences for men who kill their wives or girlfriends, but heavy sentences on the women who fight against violence and accidentally kill the male culprits.
Yes, there's a big difference in length of punishment. The longest prison sentences are for women who kill men, who kill their abusers.
Last week, the Chinese Supreme Court issued a principle for the judges in China and said that the judges should consider the fact that women, when they are fighting against their abusers, might accidentally hurt the abusers, and they should not be heavily sentenced. But how much is that going to work? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because many of the judges, they are also the defender of the patriarchal system.
Yeah. So with all of this going on with the male population, what are, you think, women's requirements these days for men? What is dating like in China? What are young women demanding? What are they looking for? I think number one would be someone who's not violent or who's respectful.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case. Unfortunately, the Chinese women, because of the violent environment and violent family culture, many of them have been insensitized when they meet violence. So they cannot quite differentiate what is violence. For example, control is a kind of violence, right? Tight control on your daily lives, like what you should eat, how you should look, whom do you go out with. And controlling relationship is still very common in China, widely seen as love, a sign of love. And so the problem here is that we have these girls who have been heavily controlled and also abused without them knowing by their parents. So when they date guys, very often it is to repeat the pattern. And so many women suffer from domestic violence without knowing that they suffer from it. And they think this is love. This is the sad thing. So the Chinese women are still educated by the family and the social culture, so romantic TV series or films or novels, to focus on the man's power, whether he's a powerful man, whether he has social status. And then maybe if they dare to have higher standard, they want the man to look good.
Yeah.
But that's not the most important criteria. It's always that they want a man who could provide them with the power and money and influence that they want, but they don't have.
That he is a competitor in the patriarchy.
Yeah. And also, of course, they would wish that the men are caring. But their requirements on the men's care is rather low because they have never been really cared for. So men very often easily lure them by showing just a bit of friendly gestures, just a bit of care, performing the act until they get married and started to show their ugly side. Very often you see these women thinking that she has got a very loving husband, but then when they enter marriage, they started to be abused and then they cannot get out.
We have the very same pattern here. We're sold these Disney films and this romantic love, and then women fantasize about their weddings from their little girls, being a princess in their relationship, and they're looking for their prince.
And the problem, nowadays, not only is in the little girls' movies and books. I open Netflix or Amazon, it's the same. I go to movie theater, it's the same. It's always focused on heterosexual romance. And also when it comes to films, cultural products that is focusing on women and women's career or their life only, without involving heterosexual romantic stories, you cannot find them. You cannot find them. It's like men are sold, mercilessly sold to us, pushed to every bit of our entertainment. And
Absolutely.
That is so tiresome.
Yeah. And I found myself, it's only now that you're past your child rearing that I'm waking up to the indoctrination I underwent, you know what I mean? That you look back and you're like, oh my God, the indoctrination was so strong.
Indoctrination is the word. Yeah. And you only see it when you start to look for something different.
Yes.
Because before that, you think it's just like air, like sunlight, like wind.
Exactly.
Just natural being, right? Natural thing.
Yeah.
But only when you start to look for something different, you realize how unnatural that is.
Exactly. How is non-traditional family constellations looked at in China? How is it treated?
I would say in many ways, actually, the gays in China have pretty good lives most of the time, unless they really want to get the legal right from it. For example, getting married.
Right.
They cannot get married. Homosexual people cannot get married in China. And the other thing I want to mention is that Chinese gays, many of them are married to a woman, having children with the woman, but still keep their gay life. And that is a big, big injustice to their wives, because the wives would have to give birth to children, take care of the household, become the free labor in the house, and not getting the love of the husband. And in not a few cases, getting sexual transmitted disease from the husband.
Sure.
Including AIDS, by the way. And there are statistics about that. And the lesbians, on the other hand, of course, many of them being pushed by their parents also get married to a guy. But then they don't get the same benefit as gays because they have to give birth. They have to be the service provider in the family. So it's not equal situation, right? And so in a way, I would say there is a sort of hidden surrogacy situation. Gays using their wives as surrogate mother without, telling them that this is the case. And it's very hard. It's very hard for the lesbians in China. But I'm not denying that the gays in China also have been persecuted in their own way. They are also suppressed by the society and by the government. But I'm a feminist who put women's interests in the first place. So I have more sympathy with the lesbians in China. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, I've read about and I've seen talk about the rise of both men and women deciding they don't want families or don't want marriage, like the rise of dinks, as we call them here. And there was this moment that went viral in China that I heard about. We're the last generation. Thank you. Do you know what I'm talking? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's during the pandemic. I think it's in Shanghai, but I'm not sure. But in one of the eastern cities in China, at that time, China was not only locking down many cities. When I say lockdown, that means people are locked at home. They are locked at home, not even in their building, but at home. So they cannot get out of the house. And every day, the people have to go downstairs wearing masks and all that and queue up and get examined whether they are positive with COVID. If they are, then they will be sent to a sort of quarantine center, which people refuse to go because it's like a warehouse of human beings, and there you get infected even easily. One person in that building has been infected, tested positive, and then the whole building will be transferred to this quarantine center. So there are rebellions against this, especially young people, when the, how do you call it, pandemic control staffs, I call them, coming to your house and say, you have to go with us to the quarantine center. Some young people rebel against that. And one of them, I mean, normally when they rebel against it, they will film it nowadays. They always film whatever they do so that they keep the evidences. One of them opened the door and talked to these staffs who want to collect them and said, we don't want to go. And I'm not infected. I will not go. And the guy said, the staff said, if you don't go, then this will be a bad record written in your files, and it will affect 3 generations of your offspring. Because once your file is with such a bad record, then your children and your children's children might not be allowed to find jobs in the government. And the young man said, we are the last generation, thank you. So he closed the door. And that went viral, that video. And so many young people started this hashtag last generation movement on the internet. And of course, the government banned this hashtag. But I think that has planted the idea into many young people's mind and show them that this is possible. This is an effective way to rebel against the control imposed on them.
To just not go along with the plan, to just like refuse to make the next generation and refuse to marry, refuse to do all the things that the government want them to do and have children, just like not participate in the future.
Exactly. To just not bring your children to this world so that the powerful people can use them to control you, and also not to subject another generation of people to such a dictator or tyranny.
Which is a big, big statement. It's a very, very strong statement. Much like 4B, it's very similar.
Exactly. It's just the 4B, especially the part about not having children. I think now it is a global movement for different reasons. Younger generation get to this conclusion, which is very intelligent and informed decision. On one hand, you have patriarchy. You have this relentless capitalism driving everybody to sacrifice all their lives for the richness of a few and suffering from all this pressure, sacrificing their health, their freedom and everything. And then, on the other hand, you have a planet ecosystem collapsing because of that. And then you have a patriarchal power system, power hierarchy that is creating all this injustice and violence, systematic violence. Why? Why should we reproduce? This is actually a very intelligent conclusion. Why should we
Absolutely
reproduce?
Yeah.
I'm actually quite liberated by this movement. Before this, without knowing this, without thinking clearly, I had a daughter, and I never regretted that. I really love my daughter. But there's not a single day when I don't regret the fact that I have to help her to survive in such an unjust world, facing male violence every day. And there are so few choices for her in this world. There's no escape even.
Yeah. We know there's no escape. Yeah. I have a daughter too, one daughter only. I'm glad I didn't have any more. I'm very grateful for her, but I was also very young. But I'm very grateful I didn't continue having children.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So you see, that's why I'm working so hard to be a feminist, to change the world, because I want my daughter at least to have some legacy from me.
Same. I wanted to ask you about your podcast and, your kind of feminist work. I saw you at 2 panels at Philia and really enjoyed them both.
Thank you.
Beyond the Misogynist Backlash was one, and the other one was on surrogacy. I'm curious, I can't listen to your podcast because it's in Chinese and I don't understand Chinese. But can you tell me about your podcast, the name of it, what your mission is with it, and how it's doing, and what you're doing, and who the audience is?
My podcast is called the Seahorse Planet podcast. Initially, the name comes from the knowledge that seahorse is a species that the female seahorse laid the fertilized eggs in the pouch of the male seahorse. So the males will show the responsibility of raising the offspring, give them more sense of duty, purpose of life. So that would be a harmonious society. That was my goal, and my goal has changed ever since then, I think. But I have progressed. So at that time, I was a liberal feminist. It was in 2018, right? When the MeToo started in China. I felt the urge to speak out like all these young girls, all these words, the anger, my wish, my aspiration, truly to present all my real thinking to the world, to talk with other women. Before that, I was a journalist who worked in the international politics as not only journalist, but also a policy analyzer. So I was dealing mostly with men, powerful men, egoistic men, and, elitist men, whatever. I had a lot of genuine concerns and emotions that I could not speak on the media at that time, which was dominated by men and male-thinking women, by the way. And so I finally got this opportunity and started a podcast, and unexpectedly, it gained more attention than I thought. I knew from the very beginning what I said will be censored in China. So I kept a low profile, but unfortunately it got so popular, it quickly gained the attention of the authority, and it was banned in 2021 on all the podcast platforms and social medias in China.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I know. I thought it was a badge of honor. And
yeah, that's good.
And then I built a website, and the website was initially still possible to access from China without crossing the firewall. But then it became so popular again that it was again blocked by the Great Firewall in China. So now I distribute it through the newsletter and some other platforms, like mostly outside China. So my podcast mostly focus on presenting the thinking and lifestyles and life stories of women who have displayed their strengths and wisdoms that leads to women's liberation. And a recent new topic is matriarchy. Yeah, so it's actually rather positive. It's full of reflection on the problems of patriarchy, but also I never end there. You can review the crimes that men have committed endlessly, but that's going to trap us incessantly in these details. So I always focus on how these individual women liberate themselves in their life. How do they find a way out, at least to gain their freedom and dignity?
I love that.
Yeah. I think focusing only on what damage that patriarchy has done can weaken us.
You just end up feeling overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, helpless, desperate, and tend to give up. So that's why the new topic about matriarchy is really, really great. In the past, we talk about personal liberation. You run away from controlling families. You don't have children. And you try to earn money to gain your personal freedom, but it's not collective liberation. To achieve collective liberation, we have to know where the society should go, what kind of society we want to construct, to build. And that is clearly matriarchy. So I learned about that and I was so happy. And now I have an audience that is really curious about matriarchy. And many of them visited the Mosuo people, which is the most well-known matriarchal tribe in China. It's an ethnic minority, and learning from them. Although many of these matriarchal societies in China have been encroached and changed under the patriarchy surroundings, but matriarchal order or the matriarchal culture is still rather well kept. And that will be my devoted topic for the next decades, I think.
I love that. It sounds actually like our podcasts are a little bit similar. we have, and we can't have too many of our voices out there.
That's too few.
Woman,
not enough.
Yes,
far from enough.
Yeah. Every woman who has something to say about how we make a better world for women should be out there with a microphone.
Exactly. Make your own podcast, make your own social media account. Nothing is enough right now. But a rare content is, what is my imagination of a better society?
Oh, yeah.
What could be done? What kind of society we really want? Once you see that, you feel really good. You feel really empowered to do something. For example, recently I saw this post on Instagram about Bogota experimenting on a kind of very matriarchal practice, although they don't name it like that. The country actually decided to calculate the unpaid work of women and reward them accordingly. And how do they reward? They don't do it with money, but do it with helping each other. Like you did unpaid work here, then you get unpaid work from other people as an exchange.
Wow.
And that is gift economy.
And that is the gift economy, exactly. The backbone of matriarchal organizations.
Society. Yeah, exactly. And that kind of practice should be more. Right? And then there will be many other ways, like to build matriarchy within patriarchal structure. For example, women living together, women marrying women, even if they are not homosexual, and organizing alternative families or community support, exchanging help instead of calculating everything with money, and all these kind of things. There are so many ways to achieve that.
Yes. Our imagination is the limit here a little bit. Patriarchy is our limit too, but our imagination to free ourselves. We don't want equality. What's equality? Equality with men? That's meaningless. We want a different world altogether. So let's imagine that world.
Yeah. Exactly. And I believe that only when women are in power can we have such a world.
100%. 100%, of course. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for coming on and talking with me. It was a great conversation, and I'm so interested in how women's rights struggle looks for other women across the world. And I think we all need to know more and learn from each other.
Thank you for your amazing work. I mean, my podcast can only address to the Chinese audience, but yours would help to reach a much wider audience. And I would appreciate more exchange also.
Yes. I'm very sorry I can't listen to yours because I'd love to.
Let's hope AI will do their job better in the future. Then we can translate automatically.
Yeah, I wish. All right, well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Subject to Power. You can find the show online at subjecttopower.com or subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts. I'd love to know your thoughts on these conversations, so please drop a note on the website or find us on social media. The best way to support the show is to rate and review Subject to Power on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. Subject to Power is written, hosted, and produced by me, El Kamihira. Audio engineering is done by Jason Sheasley at Abridged Audio. Cover art by B. Johnson, and music by Beware of Darkness.